Welcome to New Market Arms, and today we're going to be taking a look at a World War II Colt Commercial Model 1911A1. This particular pistol, which is commonly referred to as the Commercial Military Model 1911A1 is by collectors, resulted in October 1942 from Colt's inability to complete its Ordnance Department contracts with newly manufactured 1911A1 components. Colt actually continued manufacture of its commercial government model pistols in 1942 when it suspended commercial production around serial number C215083, and that C is the commercial prefix. Colt did not resume government model production until October 1946, and they began that new civilian production at serial number C for commercial 220001. But because of Colt's military contracts in October 1942, Colt transferred approximately 6,575 unsold commercial government model pistols, which this is an example of, to their existing Ordnance Department contract. This group of commercial pistols included a few national match pistols also, but this was just a standard commercial model at the time. The change from commercial model to the military 1911A1 took place under Colt Factory Order 1382. All the Swartz Safeties were removed from these pistols, and the government model stamp as well as the commercial serial number were crudely peened or bunged and then restamped, and you can see it right here, restamped on the frame. They also had U.S. Model 1911 U.S. Army stamped. The military serial number was stamped over the old commercial serial number that had been pinged out. And in addition, the commercial serial numbers under the firing pin stop were pinged and restamped with the same military serial number, the Ordnance Department serial number. The first of these commercial military 1911A1s were serial number 860003, which was assembled on October 27, 1942. The highest number known of the commercial military models is serial number 866518. As you can see here, this is serial number 865574. So it's one of the latter ones produced. There's also some evidence that some existing military contract manufactured frames and slides were also interspersed into the serial number range. Most, if not all, of these commercial military model 1911A1s were originally manufactured with the Swartz Safety, which was a safety designed by William L. Swartz in 1937, and which locked the firing pin against any movement until the grip safety was depressed. The Swartz Safety used a unique firing pin lock and spring and frame firing pin safety actuator, and that required modifications to both the slide and the frame, which we'll take a look here in a second. The Swartz modified firing pin, extractor, stocks, and commercial hammer with a mated sear were all replaced with military style parts when these pistols were taken off the commercial line and put onto the Ordnance Department contract line. Next, I wanted to show a couple of photos of what a Colt commercial model with the Swartz Safety looked like when it was still in its commercial configuration. So here you can see the left side of a Colt commercial that was in the serial number range from 1939, 1940, 1941, possibly even into 1942, that still had the Swartz Safety. And you can see the high quality Colt blued finish. And this is what it would have looked like when it was still in the commercial line. And the Colt two-line address and patent data there, which was continued over. They just took the bluing off and parkerized it. And then down there on the left side of the frame at the trigger bow, you can see a Serif T inspection stamp, and then the triangle stylized VP, which was the Colt verified proof stamp. All those were left. The bluing was just removed, and they were just parkerized. And then the next photo, you can see the right side of a Colt commercial model, the government model, still in its civilian commercial configuration. Notice the high quality rust blue finish, and you can see the government model stamp and the commercial C prefix serial number that was peened over, and the government model was replaced with United States property. The C prefix serial number was peened over, and that had the capital N underline O number, Ordnance Department specified serial number, and then that new serial number was stamped there. Forward of the slide stop pin would have been stamped after it was moved over to the ordnance line, the model 1911A1 U.S. Army nomenclature, and then to the rear of the grip panel on the right side of the frame at the top would have been the ordnance escutcheon. And of course, when they moved it over, they would have taken off the commercial model wood grip panels, and they would have moved those to the plastic grip panels. So that's what it would have looked like. And then I wanted to show a design or description of the Schwartz Patent design. It's kind of hard to tell here, but essentially what it was, in August of 1939, William L. Swartz, who was a long-term Colt employee, he received a patent for his new design. And the intent of it was to, quote, provide safety means of novel construction for locking the firing pin of a firearm against movement except when the user is properly gripping the arm preparatory to firing. So it's kind of hard to see from the diagram, but what essentially it did was, and when you see the next photos of the 1911 disassembled, there was a lever that an individual had to actually grip the grip safety and activate the grip safety, and then a lever would go up and remove a block on the firing pin. The government obviously didn't have anything. They didn't want a Swartz safety. They didn't have a need for a Swartz safety on their U.S. Army military ordnance procured weapons. So that device, since it wasn't approved, had to be removed when they converted these from commercial models to the military ordnance models. And we would actually see the Swartz safety reappear later on down the road. Kimber brought this out at some point, and there was a version of it, although it wasn't exactly a Swartz safety patent. Colt brought that back when they transitioned from the Series 80 to the Series 70 to the Series 80. Not very popular. Sometimes you could activate the grip safety and pull the trigger. The hammer would fall, but it would hit the hammer block, and the firing pin wouldn't release and actually discharge around. So it was essentially designed to keep the weapon from firing if you dropped it without somebody actually having the grip safety depressed. As noted, the commercial military slides kept their original Colt military civilian nomenclature on the slide there. Colt automatic caliber. It was still spelled in the British fashion back then, CALIBRE 45 with the ramp at Colt. And it also still retained the civilian style slide markings on the left side. So after these were converted to military models, they were proof fired, hand stamped with a proof mark, which you can see just below the magazine release button after proofing. And they were also proofed on the top of the slide, just forward of the rear sight. In addition, they were all stamped with the Ordnance Department escutcheon on the right side of the frame, which you can see there just to the left top of the right grip panel. And they also had the Ordnance Department inspector's initials stamped on the left side of the frame. And here you can see GHD. The initial inspector initials up until about serial number 861000. Those were the WB stamp, and it changed around that serial number when the GHD stamp of Brigadier General Guy Drury, who was a VMI graduate, he actually became the ordnance inspector around that serial number. And according to Scott Meadows' book, which is a really good book on Colt 1911s, This particular Colt was shipped from the factory either on January 5th, 1943 or sometime in December 1942, because there's an overlap in serial numbers, and it was shipped to Springfield Armory. Interestingly, this pistol is also in the duplicate serial number range used by Ithaca for its 1911 production in 1943. You'll notice there are several stamps here. These are standard Colt stamps. On the right side of the frame at the top of the trigger bow is a 7.3. That's an assembly stamp. And on the left side of the frame at the trigger bow, you can see the triangle VP, which is the stylized Colt verified proof stamp, and a number 8 assembly stamp. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and disassemble this pistol partially to show you the Swartz safety and some of the markings for the barrel. So take the magazine out, and let me go ahead and show you the magazine. For all the commercial government model, they all received, in addition to military production Ordnance Department contract magazines, they also took their original commercial model magazines, parkerized those, and distributed those with the actual pistols to the Ordnance Department. So it was blued as it originally was for the commercial models, to include a blued follower, but the floor plate was parkerized and it remained its commercial stamp, Colt 45 Auto. So standard disassembly. And I want to just take a note here and remind people about the proper way to disassemble 1911s. I still see people doing this, and this is the genesis for this ugly disassembly scratch, which you typically see on 1911s. Sometimes you'll even see it, you can see it really clearly there. Sometimes it even extends up into the legend, the patent data on the slide itself. But you want to go to that first disassembly notch, which is located on the bottom left side of the slide, and then on the back side you just simply push that through the detent and then just pull it straight out. You don't want to push it down, and you certainly don't want to push it up either, and that's how you disassemble it without getting that disassembly scratch, which everybody hates to see. So the first thing we'll show is the frame, and you can see that extra hole there, and that extra hole there was for the Schwartz safety device, and get you a little bit better view of that there. So that Schwartz safety was removed and just left as an empty hole. The hammer remained its standard beaver tail commercial model hammer that was just parkerized, and these other components, to include the grip safety and the mainspring housing, were relatively standard. You can see that it has an S stamp next to the Swartz safety. You wouldn't find that on standard commercial models, or correction, military models. So that's one of the distinctive characteristics of a commercial military from 1942, early 1943, is that Swartz safety. And the corresponding, let me go ahead and finish the disassembly of the slide. You can see the squared out recess on the slide, and that's where the other end of the Swartz safety actually would lock the firing pin until the the grip safety was depressed. So you can see clearly here the commercial markings on the slide, the right side, and then the commercial patent marks on the left side. And then I'll go ahead and show the serial number, because this originally had a commercial serial number stamped on the back. So I'm just going to remove that, and you can see there's a little bit of oil there, but you can see the current military serial number and some of that rough texture that you observe. That's where the original commercial serial number was peened out, and then the military Ordnance Department serial number was overstamped over top of it. So that is the matching serial number for this frame for the Ordnance Department serial number assigned by Colt after it was taken off the commercial line. And let me go ahead and just reinstall the firing pin, and then a look at the barrel. The barrels again were standard barrels from the commercial line, and you can see here it has the Colt 45 nomenclature on the left side above the lug. There's also a P stamp on the left side of the lug. The right side of the lug is blank, and then on the bottom you can see a G stamp, and this is indicative of a government barrel that was mated with this particular pistol. That is pretty much what you want to look for on a government model, commercial model conversion Colt from World War II. Again, relatively few of these were manufactured during the war, and they're relatively scarce. They're unique and easy to identify, principally by the Swartz safety hole on the frame, the corresponding Swartz safety rectangular hole in the rear of the slide, and then of course the serial numbers will be peened out. The original commercial serial numbers will be peened out from the back of the slide, as well as, let me try to get you a closer look at that serial number, and you can see where that original commercial model and commercial serial number used to be. It was peened out. United States property was overstamped. The new government serial number was overstamped. They put the ordnance escutcheon at the back, and this was a Model 1911A1. That was the additional stamp that was placed on it when it became a government contract, when it was transferred from the civilian contract. So really quickly, assembly, and I just want to make one point about assembly, since I also talked about assembling or the disassembly and how to avoid the scratch, that disassembly scratch. So all the other components, for the most part, on the commercial militaries, with the exception of those that I've just discussed, were the same as a standard 1911 military model. So when you assemble, you want to go back and do the same thing. You want to move that initial, let me show you here, this initial rearmost notch, that's the disassembly notch. You want to move it till it is just over the slide stop channel, and then you take your slide stop itself, and you notice you have a detent that you have to get past, and I'll show you this detent here real quick. The detent is located right here, and you have to get past that detent. That is the primary culprit for causing scratches that go up over the slide when somebody tries to do it. So what I do is I usually put my thumb up here as kind of a stop, and then I just push it down pressure and a little bit of up pressure to get past that pin, and then boom, it goes right into place. And that's how you avoid getting that disassembly scratch down here and up on the slide. So final assembly. And we'll do a quick functions check. With the safety on, doesn't fire. Safety off. Grip safety pressed. Hammer will go forward. And we insert our magazine again. One other thing that I would mention here is for the magazines, particularly the collector's magazines that are really good condition, this little slot, rectangular slot here, is where the magazine actually engages the magazine release. And when you're operating this weapon in a battle drill or in combat, you're just going to push this thing up there. It does impart some friction on that particular section of the magazine, and it will actually wear the bluing down, or the parkerizing if you have a parkerized magazine. So what I typically do for all these collector's guns is you'll feel it go to a stop right about here, and that's where it wants to engage. And what I do is I just push the magazine release and then just push the magazine all the way up, and then once it's all the way seated, I release the magazine catch, and it's fully seated back in. So that is a brief history of the Colt Commercial Military Model 1911 A1 pistol. Again, fairly scarce variation from World War II, early in World War II. Only about 6,575 of them were manufactured by Colt. And it's just an interesting sub-variation of World War II 1911 A1s, as well as kind of an interesting story about mass production and how even a company as large as Colt, with a pretty substantial production operation, I mean, they were still manufacturing the 1911 A1 for the military, albeit in very small numbers prior to the war. Once increased Ordnance Department contracts came in, even a large manufacturing operation like Colt had to dig into some of their commercial stocks in order to meet their Ordnance Department contracts. So it's just kind of an interesting story about production capability and how a large company like Colt had to adapt and do what they had to do to pull from existing stocks in order to meet their Ordnance Department obligations. So thank you very much, and you guys take care. Bye-bye.